Welcome to my talk, Escaping the Perfect. Does it actually matter? If there's one question I want you to remember after this talk, is exactly that. Does it actually matter? It can be a little bit philosophical, and you may be wondering, oh, all my life is questionable, but I guess that's our job as question askers, right, or QAs. So my name is Lina Zubytė. I work as independent quality consultant. I moved countries, so I came back to Lithuania a few months ago. But I did start my career in Lithuania, then I lived in Hungary, as well as Germany, and also in Sweden, that I did not mark here. I worked in different companies. I worked in startups and multinationals and consultancies, and right now I work as a freelancer. I worked in different contexts. When I started my career, I had an Excel sheet where I mark pass or fail for this test case, and I did manual testing. When I joined a startup, I was the first QA in the team, so I had to somehow advocate for testing and talk about testing awareness. At some point, I could not tackle manually testing everything because we were working with big data product. So I had to learn automation. And my first pull request was reviewed by a senior Java developer who left 30 comments about all the wrong conventions and everything I did wrong. Later on, I grew and I worked with developers and I coached them quality. And right now, I work as a QA lead in freelance. So my approach is whole team quality approach, as well as modern testing principles. And I learned lots of different tricks. Especially, I fell in love with data. Data was something that changed my perception of quality and testing a lot. But it was not always the case. I have a confession to make, and I think a lot of you have it too. I'm a recovering perfectionist. When we join as QAs in a company, we are proud to say, oh, I have attention for detail. I can find all those bugs. I can find issues. I'm a perfectionist. Actually, it bites me more than it helps in my life, because then sometimes in my personal life, I start questioning things. And some of my friends are like, Lina, stop this QAing everything. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. But when I started in my career, I really was like, imperfection shall not pass. It's my job. If it's not pixel perfect, it's not good, right? I want to be proud what we're releasing. Isn't it my job to make sure that the quality is great? So I remember how I would send an email proudly stopping the release. I actually remember doing this in a company I worked with, Martinez, who's going to speak next, where I was like, oh, we found this bug based on the specs. It's not working how we thought it should. And I was really proud of that. I remember not feeling good when I would not find bugs and then going on a bigger bug hunt so that I find at least something, at least some kind of design problem or something that I could report and say, hey, I'm useful. I found something. I remember feeling like I am representing the customer and I'm fighting for those bugs to be fixed. Yet, I think learning from data really humbled me. It was not sustainable to be this perfectionist. And currently, I also would see it a little bit dangerous if you want to be a gatekeeper, if you want to be stamp of approval. It's not only hard psychologically, because who wants that? Who wants to be accountable for the whole world's problems or that product's problems? It's a lot of responsibility there. And data was something that would change my perception on the issues that I thought are very important, which actually were not important at all. So there's one example I have. So Internet Explorer 11. It's something that some of you may remember, some of you may not, lucky you. There are also lower versions of this browser, and it caused lots of headaches. It always had issues, and I remember working in this automotive project. It was a white label platform where you actually can even warm up your car from a browser sitting at home. And when we were working on this project, we thought, who is using Internet Explorer? Like, we haven't been using it for years. And they actually announced that next summer they are deprecating it. So they're not going to support it anymore. And as a team, we thought, OK, we're not fixing those. But we got data. And in data, we saw that actually Internet Explorer 11 was third most popular browser. It had 30% of traffic. So learning this, you realize, actually, I'm not like my customer. Like, who is using this Internet Explorer? How do they look like? Who are they? And realizing this really humbles you. And that's just one example. Sometimes you also may think there's a huge crash and it's affecting so many users. You look at the data, it's 1%. And then you're like, okay, it's just me then. So very frequently, we are not our customer. As much as QAs, we are told that we are representing the customer. But I think it's sort of okay. It's okay that we are not our customer, as long as we are ready to learn from them and about them and how they're using our product. So the more I am in this field, the less I chase the perfect. You see, it's snuck in still. And I frequently question if that bug actually matters. As a QA, frequently you may think I would fight for the backlog of bugs, right? For every little bug that I found that we have to fix it. Yet right now I don't. I honestly want us to understand better what actually is important, what is the value, rather than overwhelm people with minor things that do not really matter. And I ask myself, is it actually important? There is one product that helped me a lot to question my understanding of quality and challenge my perception of it. And it's DHS2, which likely you haven't heard about. It is District Health Information System 2, which is an open source project, and it's used in more than 100 countries. The way it looks like is like this. It is used in many countries as their main healthcare system. So in Lithuania, we have Sveikata. In a lot of less developed countries, they do not have enough of funds to have their own system. So they use an open source product. This is also generic, which means that you can customize it a lot. And because it is open source, you may not really know who is using it. It's on GitHub, so anyone could download it. When you look at DHS2, and when I first started working on it, okay, like you can log in, you can customize things, you can visualize data. But then when you look at it, it's a little bit outdated, no? It doesn't look very shiny or very beautiful. And I remember speaking to the lead designer, Joe, of DHS2, and he said, you know what? I could not put this to my portfolio as a designer. Is it shiny? Is it beautiful? Is it the latest design library? No. However, we were sitting in the Oslo University and looking around, and there was this picture. Joe looked at it and said, what do you think matters for this woman? Does she care that our UX is very beautiful, that it's shiny UI? Maybe that UI cannot even load in that country because it's too heavy. What matters to this woman? She is sitting on the street trying to fill in health records. Likely it's a stressful street. There are noises, there are sounds, and she's trying not to make a mistake. Maybe there's a line of people waiting to get examined and get their data filled there. There's lots of room for error in this situation. And there are many countries that are still using paper records. So they're trying to digitalize their health, and DHS2 is actually one of those products that helps them. In those countries, the internet may not be great. They may not even have internet at all, so we have to support offline mode. And for them, what matters is just to enter this data and that it saves. They don't really care that it's very beautiful. So looking at DHS2, I really started realizing that quality is about balancing trade-offs and admitting where it's okay not to be perfect. It's really hard to understand this, and I think balance is the hardest word in the world, right? Because what does it mean? What are the trade-offs? Perfect is much easier to understand than not perfect, and something that, okay, we have to sacrifice something. However, it made me think of some concepts like security triangle. Security triangle says that you could have functionality, usability, and security. And in this triangle, you cannot have it all. You are balancing things. So imagine a system that's very secure. You have second factor authentication likely. You cannot have an easy password. And is it usable? Not really. Think of your parents or relatives who may have PIN code on their phone 000 or 1234 because it's easy to remember. They don't want a fancy PIN code or password. We ourselves forget those PIN codes. Yesterday, I almost locked out myself from my phone because I forgot which combination is it. And I was like, okay, I should put this in Password Manager because I keep forgetting about it. And it's very normal. So for your product, the question would be, where are you in the security triangle? Do you want to be more secure, but maybe less usable and functional? Or do you want to be more usable, maybe a little bit less secure? Working in DHS2, I'm like, okay, like it's healthcare data. It's really important, right? We should keep it secure. And looking at research, there are articles like this. Workarounds to computer access in healthcare organizations. You want my password or a dead patient? When I read this headline, I was like, oh, it's really challenging to work with this product because when you are in a hospital, a doctor may want to log in very quickly to the system and get data about you that could save your life. Maybe you're allergic to something, and then imagine them going, oh, I need to get my phone and get second factor authentication. And when they did this research, what they found was that in a lot of organizations, they even have stickers that you could write your username and password. They hand it out when you start working there, or a list to all logins and passwords, a document. This is common. And actually, I saw this last week. I was in the health facility, and you can see under the screen, there is PW. And I blurred it out, but it's not a very complicated password. That's a spoiler alert. So this is a health facility where if there's no officer in that room, you could just walk in and access this very easily. So when it comes to situations like that, is there a silver bullet or an answer? Not really. And we're still trying to find out. But I think as QAs, we have to realize that QA is a lot about risk management and realizing what is valuable. And it even may prove your assumptions wrong on a daily basis. When I see this password there, who am I to say, hey, you should be more careful about this? When we hear health facilities speaking, they frequently say, ooh, we don't want to log in 10 times with different passwords. We don't like that. And then you're like, what is the trade-off? What's the balance here? What could we do that both sides could benefit? So one of the things that we are actually doing, and I would like to share share this with you, is that we are going to field trips and getting to know our users. So only getting to know them, you can understand and explore on what actually matters. I have went to 2 field trips recently. So I went to Ghana and Ethiopia. And in Ghana, I'd learned many things. For example, that their coffins are quite an interesting tradition. So if you really like Coca-Cola, you could have a coffin like this. And if you were a fisherman, you could have a coffin like that. So every person, if they're extra celebratory, they could have a coffin made for them, and it's some kind of celebration. When we were stuck in a traffic jam in a very busy street in Accra, we were wondering what would our coffins be like. And while the tech lead was thinking, the implementation person who works very closely with users said, well, he would be a bug, a big bug. And as funny as it is, it was sort of true. And he just like, well, yeah, I get it. Because it's really hard to understand which bugs to fix or not in this context, and you cannot fix it all either. So it is a little bit a joke, but it's also true because we can be quite buggy and we need to choose what to fix. But we learn not only these stories about coffins, of course. We also learn about different systems of calendars. So a question to you, what is the current year in Ethiopia? So now it's 2024. What's the year in Ethiopia? Does anyone know? Well, some know because they saw the slides. Any guesses? So actually, I was in Ethiopia last week, and there still are signs saying Happy New Year because their year starts in September. And it's 2017. Ethiopia has 13 months. 12 months have 30 days, and the 13th month has 5 days. They are in different year. They also have different time. So right now would be, I don't know, -6, I think. So it would be 4:23 or so. And understanding this and seeing the country, you're like, okay, like we really thought that most of people use similar calendar, but actually no. A lot of countries are using different calendars and they live in very different conditions. So then when they're using the product, almost nothing works for them because the timestamps are actually different. So we see lots of issues with that. In these trips, we also saw health facilities. And we went to places where sometimes it looks a little bit run down and sun has faded the posters. And we learn a lot. So I think it's okay and even part of the job for us to be proven wrong on what actually matters. When we went there, I realized that offline mode is super important, even though it's so hard for us to imagine it here in Lithuania. We have a great internet, right? Why would anyone want an offline mode? But it's a reality there for many users. Some bugs that we thought, oh, they are in outdated UI, who is ever going to use that, are the daily workflow for some people, and they should be fixed. Very frequently, we would say upgrade it or use it that way without realizing that there could be different reasons why they're not doing that. There could be some reasons which are political, some that are stigma, and some even measurement systems like in Ethiopia, right? They may try and then they crash. Or about upgrades, it's big investment from the company, from the country to do it. So then they may not even schedule it in. And talking about stigmas, when we were in Ghana, we visited HIV tracking facilities. And there would be sometimes data missing. So a patient comes in, they get medication. The medication for HIV can help you live a normal lifetime. So you're not contagious, you're living a sort of healthy as much as possible life. And then some people just drop out. And you're like, why? Why are they dropping out? And then we were asking the officer in Ghana and saying, why do people just disappear from the system? And they said, the church. Like, what? Like, why the church? So apparently, if people start going to church in Ghana, they get told that they will be healed. They do not need to go to the hospital anymore. And this is the reality which in our system, when we just look at data, we just see missing data, right? And we don't understand all this context there. So the field data is something that really adds a lot of value to us. And we understand coming back that, hey, actually, this bug is really important, and that one maybe is not important at all. So talking about edge cases, sometimes we think, oh, it's an edge case, nobody would do that. But in those countries, we could see the edge cases in action, which were not really an edge case. They were a daily business. We were in Ethiopia last week, and then the internet was quite spotty. They had like a stick that they use for the internet, and then they had an offline instance, and the computer was so old, it needed maintenance. So then the officer tried to open the tab with the app, and then they opened another tab, and then I actually filmed this, and this is a GIF of them frantically switching between tabs, checking, has it loaded or not? It's not sped up, it's just a person clicking very quickly. And we were like, what's happening? Borderline, you want to stop them and say, it's okay, breathe, wait. If when it loads, it loads. And then they eventually the app loaded and there was this upload button. And what they did is they clicked this upload button 7 times furiously. And when it did not react the first time, they just kept on going, right? And it was slow connection, an old computer. So what we did was we held our breaths. We really thought something will happen, like there will be a crash or there will be some unexpected behavior that we didn't think about. And we realized that we haven't tested it. Because who does that, right? Who does that? You expect a person to click once and then something loads or not loads. And then there we saw a person clicking frantically 7 times. And then all of us were a little bit uneasy and looking around and seeing how each of us will react. That is an edge case that we would consider in countries with great internet and good computers, but it's a reality there. They're stressed out, they want it to work, they want it to open, it doesn't open, they click again. So this proves that testing is a continuous learning process. And here we really have to embrace our creativity. I really love testing because of that, because we really can learn so much and expand our knowledge and try to think of very different users than we are. One of the books that we thought about when we remembered this frustrated user was 50 Quick Ideas for Better Tests by Gojko Adzic and more. And there they are telling about mnemonic called shaded figs. Has anyone heard about shaded figs before? No? So shaded figs say that you should test the scary path, the highest risk path, the happy path, which is our usual path that we test, the angry path, where application may react badly, the delinquent path, where there are some security risks, embarrassing, if it broke, that would be quite embarrassing, desolate, you give some bleakness, zeros, nulls, and so on, forgetful, you fill up the storage and see what happens then, indecisive, think about a user that doesn't know what to do. They just click there, they change their mind. Greedy, when you select everything. Stressful, you're exploring the breaking points. Maybe these testing ways are not something you want to do on a daily basis. You may want to have this session maybe once in a while, maybe as a group, and just explore the behavior. But I think this mnemonic really helps us think about different users and different conditions. Like this frustrated user, that's a great persona to think about, that you're just clicking because you're really frustrated and stressed. So to summarize this, I would like also to give some more tips and reminders for you. And a lot of them are questions that we can ask ourselves in a daily job. So working with quality is very interesting and important, but it's also very broad. So I think all of us have to keep on learning and understanding what we're working with. And there are some questions that we constantly can ask. Who are our users and stakeholders? Can we get to know them? As they say, quality is different to different people, and you have to understand what are the decision makers, who are the decision makers in your context. Do you have data from analytics and monitoring? I think we have to speak with data, not just with gut feeling or that I think it's important. Tell why it's important. Give context. Very frequently we say, oh, I did this test plan. What does it mean? What did you test? Keep only what's essential. And here it could be a little bit controversial, right? Because we should fix everything. But no, we shouldn't, actually. So I would question your backlog if you have more than 100 bugs. Are you going to fix all of them? Maybe it's time to be honest and real with yourself and close the ones that you're never going to fix. And as a QA, to say it, sometimes it's like, oh, what? You don't want it fixed? You don't want great quality? I do, but I also don't want noise. Balance trade-offs. Frequently, when I ask in the interview how much testing is enough, I get all kinds of answers. And I would ask you, can you answer this question without telling never enough? It really annoys me when I ask how much testing is enough. Well, testing never ends. I could test as much as I could. No, you have to know the risks. You have to know the value of the product. And as a QA, especially, you have to understand what's essential and how to manage your time. And lastly, ask, does that bug actually matter? Or it's more important for you to release it, even with that bug there. Maybe it's okay. So to summarize this, always question yourself and others if it actually matters. The hard truth is that some of your release stoppers should never be fixed, while some of the edge cases are real people. And I have some resources recommendations, and this is the Slido.
Okay, thank you, Lina. Actually, there are questions in Slido, a lot of them. And some of them, I can group some of them. So let's start with unusual topic, maybe not so related with your talk, but about the world of freelance. How do you find job of freelance, and how the daily routine looks like? How is that different from working on consultancy, on the projects and so on?
So actually the job found me, and then I made the decision for freelance. So that's what I did. So I'm sorry, it's not the usual answer or path likely. And how the day looks like you're working remote. So basically you go to the office once in a while to see the project you're working on, right? Or, I don't know, depends on the setup you have with them. The freelance means individuali veikla. So in Lithuania, you're doing your own taxes, and that can be frustrating. But that's, I think, the main kind of difference.
All right. As a QA, do you think it's worth spending time investigating a bug that happens randomly when testing, but support actually gets these bugs from paying clients?
Yeah, that's an ethical question, right? What is important here? Is it the money bags? Or is it something that's very, just maybe quantifiably huge issue? I think it's a question a little bit for your company overall and the culture. Because we, as an open source project, we also have funders, right? So then we have to understand, okay, should we listen to the ones who are funding and giving the money to make this project work? Or should we listen to the users who actually use the product? And I think that's a balancing question for the leadership overall. So not just you should make this decision. It could be that the paying clients as well are reporting really valid bugs, right? But I would say take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because money is involved, and money is not always very clean. Philosophical.
All right, all right. Kind of on similar note, I feel like there is a lot of smart people in the room, and they understand that, you know, we can live with imperfections. But how do you explain managers that we don't have to be perfect?
I think managers also understand it frequently, and talking about making impact there, I feel like QAs could make a substantial impact there if you have data. Speak with data, not your feelings, not what should be. I understand we get triggered, but I think it's important for us to also work on our emotional intelligence and manage the conversations. It could be that sometimes you need to manage up a little bit, right? That's a different book, different conversation, how to do that. Yet, if you speak with data, it's not something you can deny. So telling that, okay, this is 1% and this is actually affecting 50% of users, which one do you think is important? I guess also the mental trick would be to present the idea in a way that they think that they came up with a solution. So you're just telling, okay, this and this and this, what would you do in this case? And then they say, oh, actually this, because it's 50% of users. Great. That's what I thought as well, but you shouldn't even add this likely. You should still help them understand this. So use data and always try to also give alternatives. Because I think when we don't talk about what is actually important, we want everything, and then we may not get anything as a result. So understanding that there are always trade-offs, that's a message you could formulate and say, okay, we do this or that, and give them a selection choice.
Does the same advice apply to testers who are stubborn and say that every bug should be fixed before the release?
Yeah, I think your manager should talk to you then. But some managers are the same, so then it's also like, yeah, because I think, yeah, like how do you handle those testers as well? You have to humble them, some of them, right? When we start, I think I'm sometimes envious of how confident I was when I started my job. I knew so much. I felt like I know everything. And now I feel I don't know anything. And sometimes I'm envious of testers who are like, oh, yeah, it should be fixed. I'm like, oh, how do you know? And of course, asking and getting data is something you can learn from. And I think with time, you get knocked down, right? Because actually life shows you different lessons, and you learn and you realize, okay, actually maybe I don't know everything. But sometimes you have to help people see it as well. So when we go to field, for example, we bring back this feedback to our teams. And when we communicate, we can say, actually, this person in this country really struggled with that, and we give some examples, because it's even hard to understand it, right? You're like, what do you mean you click 7 times? Why? But then you give some context and you share knowledge, and that helps a lot.
I see the next question. For me personally, it's an interesting one. Have you found any bugs that users rely on for their daily use and should not be fixed? So basically, not a bug, but a feature.
Yeah, and also, I would also add the one interesting case for us was that we found how users were abusing bugs for their workflows. So when we fixed a bug, they were unhappy. Because they were like, yeah, but this was like, and because they found a workaround and they used it in their workflow. And then we were like, it actually wasn't supposed to work like that. They're like, what do you mean? Like, we did this for 2 years. And that's really interesting. So I think for sure, there are many bugs that maybe are features, or there are bugs that became features just because they are there, and people learn how to be creative and work around it.
So in case that you notice that, okay, you fixed a bug, then user unhappy, and would you consider like reverting?
I guess, yeah, you would at least have a conversation, because it's not you, the almighty, making decisions. It's in the end the users, right? And if most of users were totally fine with it and they tamed this bug, right, it became a pet, then maybe it should be like that. So we shouldn't take it away from them. But also it's a lot about knowledge, right, and training. So maybe we didn't do as good of a job in training, in documentation, in telling about it. And if we change this and say, actually, you can do the same workflow in a different way, that can achieve the same goal for them.
Another interesting angle there about defect management, I would say. What do you think? Is it better to create the ticket for the bug and close it with comment, even if it not be fixed, just to have it for the history?
Yeah, I think so. So at least you have context. I think context is very important, because of course it depends. If it's like a very small bug and it takes lots of time to create it, maybe it's not worth the effort. Yet it can really help for anyone who wants to report the same thing to see the context why it was closed. So in DHIS2, we did a big cleanup mission, actually, and product managers went through the backlog, and they closed a lot. One product manager got a bit sassy and then would write, nobody cares about this, and then close it. But then we were like, come on, like, you have to give a reason, because some people may look at it again and say, okay, why nobody cares? I care about it. But if it becomes actually important, we always say, you can create it again. So please just create it again, and then, it has extra weight. Maybe we did not know enough, and we closed it.
Okay. Another one. What do you do when you do not have data?
That is our challenge as well, because it's open source. We don't know who is using it and how. So our data collection is not as automatic as in some other projects. Then you talk to the users, which is much slower. So maybe you have to befriend the UX team that you have in your company, and maybe get on some kind of user testing session where you see how they use it, as well as talk to some of those customers, like what are the main workflows? Because they usually have a quite simple workflow that they do on an everyday basis. And you find it out, and then maybe you talk to another person, and you have at least a rough idea on how they're using it and have a contact with them. It could be, of course, depending on your company, you may need to go through different departments, different teams, and the politics.
Yet another one, probably about finding edge cases and what's your strategy there, because considering the amount of different possibilities, it might be impossible to cover them all, so what then?
And it's not. Deal with it. I mean, go to therapy. You won't be perfect. I mean, you will not find everything. You will have edge cases that turn out to be real people, right? That you thought is an edge case. There could be cases that you find out and you are embarrassed because you never tested it. This tapping thing we saw first time a year ago on an Android app, and the Android person was like, ugh. And then they fixed it in the team because they brought it back and they never thought about it. I mean, you will find those edge cases. You will never find all of them. I would say this is also related with this QA as a gatekeeper, not very good mindset, because alone you cannot do much. So I would say try to also involve more people to test, more diverse people to test, try to get to know the users, and then you will actually find out more and more of those edge cases. But it's a continuous process. You will never have them all. And tomorrow there may be a new case as well that you find out.
All right, and hopefully the last one, regarding the security topic, because you show that triangle and those compromises you need to make. So what do you think about health sector and data hacks or corruption? Can you trust in secure data? Are you fine if your private records gets leaked?
Yeah, it's a very complex topic. I don't think I have a clear answer. I think overall, maybe this is something how we need to rethink security overall, because it's not very easy for us to have these two-factor authentications. Maybe it could be fingerprints. Maybe it could be something much faster that you access the data. So I think we should try to make security maybe more usable in this case, because healthcare data is important. It's very private, and it could be used in some countries as a political kind of measure, right? So think of HIV, right? It's a stigma in a lot of countries. And even in Ghana, people go to different districts sometimes to get medication because they're embarrassed, because there's lots of shame surrounding these. There are cases where, family doesn't know it. And then imagine the data gets leaked. It's extremely sensitive, and I really would be voting for more security in healthcare. I think that was my default when I joined. It's like, we have to be very secure. But then you see the hospitals and you see this research as well. And you're like, ooh, what do we do then? Because they want to access it quickly. So I think we need better measurements. What exactly? I don't know. Maybe you will help think of it.
Thank you, Lina, very much.